Hey everyone, Sky here to discuss Killers of the Flower Moon, starring both Leonardo DiCaprio and Robert De Niro, as well as Lily Gladstone, Jesse Plemons, Tantoo Cardinal, John Lithgow, and Brendan Fraser, directed by Martin Scorsese. Now, before I get into this movie, De Niro and DiCaprio have worked with each other before, but I'm not going to do that movie, but I'm doing a welcome back to Martin Scorsese after working with DiCaprio. Even though I did Wolf of Wall Street first after the Wall Street retrospective, but I did also do Gangs of New York, The Aviator, The Departed, and Shutter Island, and I did all the collaborations with De Niro after The Irishman, and now I'm returning to both Scorsese along with DiCaprio and De Niro together for the first time ever in this movie, but I have done movies with them in the movie before. And I'm thinking to myself, this is a 3.5 hour movie. After Avatar The Way of Water, and I have, like that one, I went a couple of times to see this one because of the note taking for second viewing. But after that, I am done with 3.5 hour films in general. But let's see if it's worth it. Let's get into the movie. The movie sets in the year 1919 to 1921 in the Osage Nation land, as it begins with Native Americans doing a burial of a pipe while speaking their native language as they prepare for the Caucasian Americans come to Tulsa, Oklahoma, which is where the movie is filmed at. And they dance around the oil, and the cinematography looks tremendous in this movie, as this is a great looking movie thanks to the cinematographer Rodrigo Prieto, forgive me if I said the name wrong, and the score when we get the black and white footage of Oklahoma, Tulsa, the score by the late Robbie Robertson, who just recently passed away, may he rest in peace, was very well done. Ernest Burkhart, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, arrives to Osage and meets his driver, who happens to be Hector, I think is his name. I forget the guy's name, but I think his name is Hector. I'll bring him up later. And takes him to the house of his uncle William Hale, or as he calls King, played by Robert De Niro, along with his brother Byron, his little cousin Lily, and Aunt Myrtle, as Ernest comes back from World War I and has a conversation with William as he tells him to call him uncle or king like he did with when he was young. And the dialogue written by Martin Scorsese and Eric Roth was well done, as this was based on a book by David Gran, as I've never read the book and probably never will for that matter. I hear it's 300 pages, so maybe I might one day, I'm not sure, based on how long this movie is. And this movie is very long at 3.5 hours. And after Avatar The Way of Water, like I just brought up, because like this movie, I saw it twice for this review, and that's 7 hours of my life at a movie theater. And I'm done with 3.5 hour films in general, especially if I have to review them for a show. But so far it's worth it in my opinion. We get a voiceover by Molly, played by Lily Gladstone, about her family and how they went through hell over the years being a Native American. And we meet the family of Molly, for example, Anna, Rita, Minnie, Henry. That's the one that drove Ernest at the beginning of the movie. And the mother, Lizzie Q, played by Tantoo Cardinal, as Ernest offers Molly a ride back to church as well as her house. And I really like and care for these characters. Ernest and Molly have dinner together as they talk about why Molly doesn't have a husband, and she calls him a coyote, and have a little whiskey and have a nice quiet time while listening to the rainstorm, anyways, together. And the movie is shot well, as this movie is well made in my opinion. Ernest meets Minnie's husband, Bill Smith, at a church, while Molly and her sisters gossip about Ernest as they're in love and get married rather quickly, and 35 minutes into the movie. And this movie has romance and it has crime later on in the film. And I do like the wedding scenes, as there is a mixture of Caucasians and Native Americans, as William makes a speech at their wedding, which was a nice piece of dialogue while they have fun at the wedding, and the performances by the actors, including DiCaprio and De Niro and Lily Gladstone, are outstanding in my opinion. Minnie reaches her death, and Ernest and William, while Bill Smith asks Ernest to step outside, and they have a conversation. For what reason? Because of how it's going, as Lizzie is depressed about losing a daughter, and William brings up to Ernest's attention, Anna has a gun, and that's what I'm thinking. And that's when I'm thinking what I'm thinking. William and Ernest are the killers of the Flower Moon, and that makes sense as far as the title is concerned. Anna comes to the house all drunk and shit, while Lizzie sees an owl as she might be done with life, and says to Molly she wants Anna, and she's the favorite of, I'm guessing, of Lizzie's children, which is a very heartbreaking scene. And Anna arrives all drunk, and Byron gets punched in the face by Anna, and she threatens him and another woman while acting inappropriate with another woman named Sasha. And we see later in the movie Byron kills Anna with another man as she demands to go to a store to get some whiskey, while being forced to leave by Ernest, as Anna was being kind of a bitch to that Byron in that scene, as well as Molly. And in my opinion, when the audience sees Anna dead by the next scene, I thought to myself, that bitch deserved to die as far as I'm concerned. Nothing against the actress, but yeah, for being drunk all the damn time. But to be fair, I didn't want her shot and killed by anyone, like they will explain later in the movie. Both families come together and have a funeral and talk about trying to find out how Anna got killed, or who killed Anna, and hunts for the motherfucker, as William volunteers $1,000 for as a reward for the information. And believe it or not, William is kind of the sheriff or deputy in town, something like that. I forget what it is. And they do an autopsy of Anna outside, which was, I guess, what happened back in the 1920s. And I like the scene as it works quite well. Ernest tells a casket designer, Frank, who charges them lots of money, to leave the jewels because it's her sister, and we move on to a case solver, William Burns, and he gets killed rather quickly, and I thought, what the fuck was the point of introducing that character, as this needed some editing, despite this is so far a really good movie, but this needed some trimming down, as this is a very long movie, while the audience learns Anna was pregnant, and we're introduced to Blackie Thompson, and they talk about a deal of killing Lizzie as she becomes a pain in the ass for him, and Molly can't sleep anymore and begs for Ernest to stay with her, and DiCaprio and Lily Gladstone, have very good chemistry. They visit a couple of brothers who are doctors named Dr. Shawn, I don't know if I'm saying that right, please forgive me, and give Millie a needle of some kind so she can stop eating sweets, while William talks with Ernest and goes to a place where Ernest gets slapped in the ass by William and Byron for making a dumb deal with Blackie. And this scene was a tad bit bizarre, and this could be in the editing room floor, as well as talking to Blackie into doing a crime for Ernest. Could be in the editing room floor as well, as these scenes kind of dragged a bit. We meet Henry Grammer as well as John Berger, and John, who will do some jobs for Ernest later on, while the Dr. Shawn brothers gives Molly another needle in front of Ernest, and she says it doesn't help her get better, and Ernest does it himself while he sends the doctors away because of Molly, and I'm having a hard time thinking Ernest is the good guy as he injects her with more of the needle shit. And I have to confess, I hate needles as they scared the shit out of me. While Henry goes to the Dr. Shawn brothers, while William advises Henry not to beat up Roy Bunch and not to do anything stupid, as he unfortunately does, and William comes to the rescue, Lizzie dies, and I did feel sad about it, but these scenes are good, but at the same time, I'm like, Scorsese, get to the fucking point of the movie, for fuck's sakes, because you're making a movie about family and you're dragging it for far too long. While having dinner with William, Molly, and Ernest, telling the table she's pregnant with another baby, and Henry finds out, while we learned earlier, Molly was married to Henry before, and that was the driver, by the way, folks. that drove Ernest at the beginning. But anyways, before any of the movies has started, which makes perfect sense as I sense jealousy from Ernest, asking John Ramsey to kill Henry as he accepts. But first they meet and they go out to have a drink. As he gets shot and killed, he gives Ernest the gun and says he's done with killing people. And I thought that worked for me. Molly finds out Henry is dead, as she says he was always sad. And Ernest says he killed himself, and that seemed a bit obvious while William is pissed off about how John killed Henry, and some of the Native Americans are running scared. To be fair, it was the 1920s. As Ernest and William says to start running as a friendly advice, and he says shove it up William's ass as he's not his friend, which did feel a little funny, but this movie is not supposed to be funny at all. Bill sees a dead dog on his porch, while Molly is at Rita's place, while Ernest and Bill have a conversation, and Ernest seems nervous and explains to Bill how he doesn't like talking to him, which is kind of funny as well, not that it's meant to be. William goes to Fort Worth, which I believe is in Texas. Tell me I'm wrong on that on the comments. I don't know. While he tells Ernest to give John Ramsey a message to give witches killing someone named AC right away. And next thing you know, Molly gets home from Rita's and tells her to stay in the house as her house and by her I mean Rita's house explodes and people go around the place to help them out, and these scenes are absolutely haunting. Ernest tells Molly Rita and Bill are dead, and William comes home and they find missing body pieces like a hand, for example, which is horrifying for a drama. Molly goes to Washington, D.C. to go to the president of the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover, which is hilarious because DiCaprio did play him in a Clint Eastwood biopic called J. Edgar. But she asks him to help out with the murders, and when Molly gets home, Ernest gives a deadly needle to Molly to make her sicker than she is, and drugs her, which is a terrible, terrible idea, but he wants to slow her down, and that scene in Washington is great. DC is great to look at, as I've been there, but not when it was like in the 1920s, I'll say. Molly is sicker than ever, and she sees the owl Lizzie saw earlier in the film, and she talks to Ernest about a man with a hat, and FBI agent Tom White, played by Jesse Plemons, knocks on the door and investigates in the murder of her family, and Ernest answers the door and refuses to let him in because she's sick and tells him to come back on Friday. And I like the character Jesse Plemons plays in this movie. And we meet John Wren, who's new in town, and I'm guessing with the FBI. I'm not 100% certain, but let's move on. And Ernest talks with William about the FBI coming to Ernest's house, and William says they'll talk about it later, maybe off screen, because I don't remember seeing it again after hearing it ever again. As we move on to Tom talking with Molly's family members that are still alive, and William talks with insurance people about something they can't honor, and he's pissed, I'll say. And Tom talks with the Dr. Shawn brothers, and they blow him and his partner off and talk with William, and they're not being super helpful and very uncooperative as William talks with Blackie in a theater about the FBI coming for them. And I don't mind these scenes, but at the same time, it's dragging the movie for a 3.5-hour runtime that this movie has. Tom, with the FBI, talks with the townsfolks as they get closer to the case being solved. Ernest talks with William about how Ernest is protected by William's lawyer, who we'll meet later in the movie, and he signs something while they get a spy stealing from a mirror, and these scenes are kind of intense. Tom gets information from an elderly man about who talked about what happened in town and how Anna was killed by Byron, and someone by the name of Kelsey Morrison, who we met earlier, but I don't remember seeing him around. And a talk with Kelsey gets interrogated by the FBI and talks about him like a traitor. He is, and this is a POV moment as the movie tells the POV of the Native Americans as there's fire being shed in the neighborhood of Osage, and these scenes were shot hauntingly. And I was a little terrified. Ernest continues to give Molly the drug and a needle, and she says, you're next, and I know he's going to be arrested for the last 50 minutes left in the movie, as there is that much of the movie left. Ernest gets arrested and interrogated by the FBI about the murders, and he gets restless from standing and talks with Blackie on how he was involved with the murder, and they bring him in to say he talked to Blackie, and he asks to talk with Blackie alone, and I was like, don't even think about letting them talk alone, as I thought they were planning something to escape. This scene is acted tremendously, sure. William goes to the house and sees Molly all drugged up, and she asks, is he real? Which makes me feel bad for Molly at this point in the movie, while her husband drugged her up, and at this point, I was caring more for Molly than Ernest and William. And the FBI arrests everybody involved with Ernest and William's murders and interrogate every single last fucking one of them, while John Wren and the FBI get Molly out of the house and put her in the hospital, while Ernest wants protection from William, and William turns himself in as a wanted man, and the FBI puts William in a jail cell, as we meet prosecutor Peter Leeward, played by John Lithgow, interviewing Blackie while Molly is walking again, and Ernest goes in the courthouse with William, as well as his lawyer W.S. Hamilton, played by Brendan Fraser, whom I swear to God, I was waiting for him for this whole movie for him to show up. And when he did, I got excited, as he was really good in The Whale, but damn, that movie was fucking depressing. Just, my God. I'll talk about that some other time. And I was also happy when John Lithgow showed up, as well, as it was so late in the movie. Ernest meets with Byron, and Molly and Ernest go to the house with Hamilton to talk about the case, and he'll spend the rest of his days in prison, and as well as being hanged, and asks if he wants William to be killed the same way. And Hamilton tells Ernest to tell the court the FBI beat him up, while he goes back home with Molly and telling her he'll be back in a couple of days and he's not in trouble. And I'm like, yeah, bullshit. I didn't believe him there, but DiCaprio does turn into some great work in this movie, don't get me wrong. As he leaves to go to a jail cell with William, Ernest goes to court with Hamilton and sees his crew betrayed them all, I'll say, and tells them what happened to Anna and how she got shot and killed, like I brought up a while ago, and it makes perfect sense as they murdered her. One of Ernest's children with lung trouble passes away, while Ernest hears it from Tom, and he cries about it and screams as William hears about it, and William tries to cheer him up, and they bury the child, and Ernest comes to the funeral. And at this point, I was feeling really bad for Ernest and Molly, as Ernest returns to the jail cell and tells William he's going to testify him, as he doesn't want any part of him anymore, as he has nothing but regret. And Ernest tells the truth about everything and points out to William he was the one responsible for getting Molly's family killed, as Ernest says to Molly he put a drug in her with the needle, and she runs out and divorces him, as we learn from something that I'm going to bring up right now, as we get something like a stage play with a cameo by Martin Scorsese, and telling them what happened to the characters right as that scene ended. And the movie ends with dancing, and this climax was depressing, but at the same time, it was a really good movie. But what will my rating be, I wonder? I'll give this movie a 8.4 out of 10. This is a great movie that is very long, but the writing was well done, as I did like and care for the characters quite a bit. But after Avatar: The Way of Water, I'm kind of done with 3.5-hour movies, but those two movies are worth it. But if there's another one next time that's just as long, I'm going to wait till it comes to streaming or video or something. But just don't do it twice in one, and also don't do it twice in one weekend like I did with both movies. The score was very good, as Robbie Robertson will be missed after this movie's score, and the cinematography was great to look at in Tulsa, Oklahoma, as it is absolutely beautiful, as this is a great looking movie that has a bit of romance, and it has crime, which works quite well for this movie being set in the 1920s during the Caucasian versus Native American times, not to be racist by any means necessary. The movie is very well made, and the performances by DiCaprio and De Niro, as well as Lily Gladstone, were outstanding. And despite it needs a little editing, but at the end of the day, I really like the movie for what it is. So this is a solid recommendation, as it's going to get nominated for Best Picture. And maybe not quite win, but it's a great movie at the end of the day. So I'd like to thank you guys for returning to DiCaprio, De Niro, and Scorsese, and put them in a mixture in a blender, and you got this. And until we ever get a next time with those two, or three, let me rephrase that, goodbye.